if you're looking for a Met who's going to be the favorite to win Rookie of the Year next year, he's probably
Yes.
the National League favorite, to be honest with you. It's Nolan McLean. He became New York's ace down the stretch, which says more about the Mets rotation than it does how good McLean was. But he was absolutely great. He's got fastball, sinker, cutter, sweeper, slider, changeup. Like everything is moving in different directions. That sweeper might be the best in baseball. It's really, really special stuff.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Big League Dreaming, the podcast, a show about baseball, dreams, and family. I'm John Gonzalez, the dad. If you're new to the show or a returning listener, you know it's a dad and his three sons talking about the game they love. On today's podcast, we have two of the three sons and a very special guest. Before we get to that very special guest, let's check in with the guys and see how they're doing. Son number one, he's based in Charlotte, North Carolina. He's our resident Mariners fan. It's Zak Gonzalez. Zak, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Mariners just signed Josh Naylor, so things are good, and the Mariners fandom. Looking forward to coming up to Michigan to see you guys for Thanksgiving soon.
Yeah, I know that's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to that as well. And I thought you'd be pretty excited about the Josh Naylor signing. Your mom was not happy with it, but that's a whole different story. She's not a fan. Let's go to son number two. He's based in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He's our New York Mets fan. And it's Ty Gonzalez. Ty, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Mom's not a Josh Naylor fan was a nice way of putting it. She's you can say a lot more about that. But yeah, I'm doing great. I'm really excited for our guest today too.
Yeah, well, you're excited because we're going to talk prospects, and you and I being, spending a lot of time in Grand Rapids there and seeing the West Michigan Whitecaps the last several years. We've got our guest probably knows a little bit about the West Michigan Whitecaps. So let's introduce him. It is Sam Dykstra, MLB.com, MLB Pipeline. You see him, hear him, read him, listen to his podcast, a little bit of everything. Sam, welcome to the show.
Hey, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. Well, it's good to have you on the show. We get to talk prospects. It's one of the things that we love to do on the show. Although our shows bounce around sometimes. I mean, sometimes we might talk, college baseball. We might talk major leagues. Obviously, a lot of major leagues. We might talk little league baseball. You never know. We run the gamut because, like I was telling you off the air, Sam, we like to just keep it a wholesome show and cover whatever topics we want to talk about. But today, we're going to deep dive into prospects. You've worked on a few lists right now. It seems like MLB Pipeline is always working on some list, Every day there's like a new list coming out. I can't keep track of them. How many lists do you think you put out a year?
Well, the main lists that we have are the top 30 prospect lists for each organization. And then we have the top 100 lists. And then we have the top 100 draft lists, which Jonathan Mayo and Jim Callis, my colleagues, work on. Then there's the international list that my colleague Jessica Borick does every year. There's always something. And we're always updating these too. If there's a trade or, somebody signs or anything like that, and we believe they're top 30 prospects, we update the lists instantly. So even when I was on vacation a couple weeks ago, I was getting an email being like, "Hey, does this guy go on the Kansas City list?" And it's like, no, this job really does never stop.
Well, we're going to go, like I said, dive deep into the prospects. I know Zak and Ty will have a lot of questions for you. Me being the former full-time journalist, now just kind of part-time journalist, we got to dive into your background. Where are you from? How did you get into this business? I mean, people want to know how can I work for MLB Pipeline,
Yeah, no, I hear that. I grew up in Palmer, Massachusetts, which is out in Western Mass, about halfway between Springfield and Worcester, about an hour 15 west of Boston. That's why I don't have an accent. A lot of people hear I'm from Massachusetts. They're like, "You actually say your R's. What's up with that?" And I'm like, "No, that's..." The accent hasn't quite traveled that far down the pike. But I did go to Boston University undergrad. I remember, I wanted to be a journalism major. So there were a lot of schools I was applying to. BU was the first one I toured. And for anybody who knows the campus, it's right next to Fenway. And my dad looked at me and it was the first tour I had. And he was like, "This feels like you." Because we had, for so many years going to Red Sox games, parked on the BU campus unknowingly. And now it's like, this is where you could study, steps away from Fenway Park. BU doesn't have a baseball team, but it just felt like a baseball school in that way. So I went there for 4 years. I interned at weei.com, which is the website for the radio station that carries Red Sox games. I got to work with Rob Bradford and Alex Spear there, and amongst many other sports writers. That was huge for my education. I did that for 2 summers. I wrote a story about Daniel Bard, who at the time looked like he was maybe going to take over for Jonathan Papelbon as the closer of the Red Sox. And it mirrored, I know this isn't a great comp in hindsight, but it mirrored what Mariano Rivera was doing early in his career, where he went from setup to closer and held down that role. So I talked to Daniel Bard and Mariano Rivera, and that was the clip I sent everywhere of like, hey, I'm 21 and I've spoken to Mariano Rivera. And that's what came up in interviews. So right out of school, I graduated a semester early, and I interviewed for MILB.com, the official website of minor league baseball. And that came up, and they asked, hey, do you want to cover minor league baseball in New York City from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. every day? And I said yes, as quickly as I could. Moved down here March 2012 and have been here ever since. So I moved throughout a few different roles at MILB.com, and then merged with MLB Pipeline in 2021, started doing prospect rankings, that kind of stuff. Still focused on features in the minor leagues, but more focused on the rankings with Jim and Jonathan. And that's been my life for now, close to the last 5 years.
That's an incredible story. I'm curious, did you play as a kid? Did you want to be an MLB player? I mean, were you big league dreaming when you were like 10 years old?
When I was 10, sure. Maybe by the time I was 13, I realized, 65 even felt fast for me. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. So I did track for my spring sport in high school, but there was not a bigger baseball fan in Palmer, Massachusetts than there was in me. Like during the 2004 World Series, I kept the roster in my wallet just to look at it throughout the day and try to dream of like, when do you go to Timlin? When do you go to Embry? Do you go to Folk in the 8th if you need it? What is the rotation lined up? Who should play second? Like all of these thoughts were just going through my head on a daily basis. So I ate baseball coverage as a kid, even if I wasn't necessarily strapping on the cleats and putting on a glove every day.
Awesome. That is awesome. Well, I sent you a little information about the guys on the podcast. They all have played in college, high school and college, and, have coached as well. So they've all have their careers. Let's go to Zach to see what first question he wants to fire your way, Sam.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about those two internships with WEEI and Boston. I mean, like you said, when you were a kid, huge Red Sox fan, when you had the opportunity to kind of work for the sports radio station and just like dive into that industry off the bat right away, be so close to Fenway Park and work out of there essentially. What kind of like motivation did that give you? Like how, for that kind of be your first job in the industry, what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I had been writing for the student newspaper, the Daily Free Press at the time, and I eventually became its sports editor. So I had experience going to sporting events and knowing what questions to ask and how a media scrum works and how availability works. But once you make it to the big leagues, it's a completely different animal. I got there, and Rob Bradford was great with me and just being like, hey, let's shepherd you towards some stories and let's walk you through what a managerial press conference looks like, and asking a question of Terry Francona, who was the Sox manager at the time. And I remember there was one question I had, I think it was about Josh Beckett against the Yankees, and he had good numbers against the Yankees. So I started spitting out the stats, and Francona was just like, all right, we get it. Just give me the question. What are you looking for here? And that was, it was a baptism by fire when you're just like, okay, listen, they don't need to know the 2.36 ERA. They just need to know what you're asking. Let them take it away from there. So that was a great opportunity. And, it was just, there are lessons from that I still take to this day of like, hey, when you have a chat, make sure they know it's on the record, or make sure you circle back with them and be like, hey, is this something I can use, or is this just us chatting? Or is this something I can file away to ask an official question later in a more on the record setting? That was huge. As much of an education as I got at BU, and I'm very grateful for it, it was actually being in the trenches that helped me a lot more do my job today.
Good question. And yeah, I can totally relate to all of that. Ty, how about you? What do you have for Sam?
Yeah, so I got a couple questions. I want to dive into like some prospect stuff. But before we do that, what like recent draftee or maybe like international signing recently has surprised you the most?
Ooh, that is a good one. Let's see. You mean from like this draft here?
Just in the past, past years, it could be anyone like who's been kind of like you didn't think they pan out and they surprised you and they're doing beyond expectations.
Well, I think the easy one is to say, and this is because it's just so fresh in my mind, it's kind of crazy to think that Trey Savage was a 2024 draft pick. He was a first rounder. Like, there's a lot of reasons to like him, but knowing that he started the year in Dunedin, and everybody's been quoting that, right? Of like, he pitched against the Jupiter Hammerheads, and now here he is against the big bad Los Angeles Dodgers. They started him out in Florida State League because it was warmer down there. It's much easier to pitch in Dunedin, Florida, than it is Vancouver or New Hampshire in the spring. So putting that aside, I still think he has gotten there much quicker than I would have expected. Even when they brought him up to Buffalo, and I was texting people and just being like, hey, when is he starting next? And they're like, well, he's not starting. We're actually going to move him to the bullpen and try him out there. And it's like, okay, so they're trying to figure out a spot for him, which makes sense with his mix and that super high release. Like, maybe it's something that only works one time through the order. And then he continued to pass tests, right? It's like, all right, they called him up. They're using him as a starter for now. All right, it looks like he might get a postseason start. Oh, wait, he got a postseason start and he shoved in that. Maybe they'll keep leaning on him. Oh, wait, now he's like starting really important games in the World Series. And the way he continued to build on that is a reminder to all of us, really, that we think about development is the point is to get to the big leagues. It's not just to get to the big leagues, it's to be successful. And development doesn't stop just because you get to that top level. And he's a perfect example of that. He's going to be one of our interesting ranking decisions this offseason, right? Because on one hand, it's the Randy Rosarena problem from 2020. I'm sure you guys remember like that postseason he had taking the Rays to the World Series. He looked like one of the best players in baseball, but he was still prospect eligible. How much do you lean on what he showed in a very small sample on the game's biggest stage versus what everybody else could be down the line? It's going to be very interesting. But Trey Savage, as we sit here right now, is one of the best pitching prospects in baseball. And he might be like number 2 or number 3. It's been an exceptional rise for him in just one full season of Pro Bowl.
Zach, I'm sure that you want to comment a little bit about that because we've talked about Savage here on this show a few times.
Yeah, that one hurt, Sam. My dad has definitely heard me because I watched Trey Savage pitch here in North Carolina for ECU, and I just loved him. He was one of my favorite. He's like the pitching guy I wanted the Mariners to draft, and then they pass on him and they get Durangelo, and I was so mad. And then to see, I mean, I'm happy for Trey Savage, but to see what he's done, like, it's just haunting me so much.
I mean, I get that. The other thing to remember, too, about what he was at ECU, especially that final year, he was coming off a time where there were some injury questions, right? Like, as unique a pitcher as he
Right.
is with that over-the-top slot and that really good riding fastball and the splitter, he had a collapsed lung in the spring. Now, he pitched really well in the postseason after that. But, like, if you're a team drafting in the first round, if there's any injury questions with a pitcher, is that a spot you want to use? For the Mariners, it was no. For the Blue Jays, it was yes. It was still a risk that the Blue Jays took on there. I'm not going to deny that.
Yeah. We've talked about it a few times, and I think not to stay on this topic too long, but I think I question whether he's going to continue that same success next year. I mean, he's still, to me, a prospect, even though he's performed on that big stage, like you mentioned. The hitters get smart really fast, the reports get written really fast, and all of a sudden, the things you were able to get away with, you can't.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we're seeing now in the game as well. And for so long, it was everybody has to have a riding fastball. Now it seems like everybody's adding a sinker, right? Because everybody has seen the riding fastball. Now, how can you add a different mix to that? For a while, it was who can have the biggest sweeping slider, to the point that we started calling the pitches sweepers. Now it's everybody adding a cutter to have something a little bit shorter if you're expecting the longer pitch. Like, we went from, hey, have 2 or 3 really, really excellent pitches to, if you can have a deep pitch mix, that's what everybody's after now, which is why you're seeing somebody like Nolan McLean do exceptionally well when he made the majors. But Trey Savage is more of that. I don't want to say old school because we're still a little bit in that era, but he's only has 3 pitches. He makes them work exceptionally well. That is a question we're going to be asking scouts and evaluators this offseason. Like, is that something that's going to work as more and more people see that splitter?
Zach, you want to follow up at all and maybe switch the topic a little bit?
Yeah. Sam, I want to ask you about research and how you research prospects. Obviously, I know there's a lot that goes into building these lists and these rankings, but what does researching prospects look like for you? Are you going to a lot of minor league games? Are you going to spring training in Arizona fall leagues? Are you there in person scouting these guys, or is kind of the bulk of it video and like talking to scouts and things like that?
I would say, if I'm not going to put a percentage on it because it could change every cycle, right? And it also depends on the player. But I do go to spring training. I'm down there not only for our own coverage for MLB Pipeline, but for MLB Network. So I have duties with the network in the morning in which I interview a prospect and give a rundown of what the farm system is and whatever camp we're in that day. And then I'm immediately running to the backfields and trying to see minor leaguers, as many of them as I can. I'm speaking to the farm director for a story. So I do that at 10 different spring training stops. And then I'm going to games during the season. I live in Brooklyn. The Brooklyn Cyclones are right down the street. But I'm also doing what we've called the MLB Pipeline Game of the Month in the past. Now it's changed to Prospect Showcase. I went to Frisco, Texas this year. I went to Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania. I'm trying to see guys in person as best I can. And the Arizona Fall League, I have a 2-week stint out there every year. And that's great because that, as I always tell people, access is never better for the fan or for the journalist than it is the AFL. So I encourage people to go out to the AFL as much as they can. But even that is still limited, right? You're not seeing everybody. Connor Griffin wasn't in the AFL this year. I was also at the Futures game, so you get a very brief look at guys there. But what I try to do is I'm looking at stats, I'm looking at video. Thankfully, we have a video system that if I want to call up every Connor Griffin homer, I can do that. I have access to synergy data, which will tell me swing and miss information, chase information on individual pitches for both hitters and pitchers. I want to do my own research and then reach out to sources and be like, this is what I see. Do you see something different? Is there something else going on here that I don't see? Because I don't want to be the guy who's calling up sources and just being like, hey, what do you have on Trey Savage? Because they're going to be like, why would I tell you? Like they want to know that I know something, that I am bringing something to the table, that it can actually be a conversation, not just like, hey, I've heard about this guy somewhere. What does he do? What does he throw? Then you're starting from scratch and you're not really, like, as much as a journalist is asking questions, journalist is also about gathering information on your own and knowing what you're going to bring to the table and building on that with sourcing. So that's basically the way I try to do it. That's the status I'm in right now, is like gathering as much information as I can. We'll first come out with the top 100 lists. I think we normally do it in January, and then the top 30 lists are later in the spring. So that's where I'm at right now in the off season. Is just I have 10 lists that I either write or oversee, or other writers who do them. And I just want to get them into a good place before I start to reach out to scouts and other evaluators in December and January and try to be like, okay, what can I add to this? How do I make a call? Sometimes it feels a little silly, but like I will lose sleep over who is the Brewers' number 15 prospect versus number 16. It's minutia, but that's what we're judged on sometimes.
It's a great question because, as the guys know, we grew up with the West Michigan Whitecaps there in Grand Rapids. I mean, they were there the day the park opened up. You heard Zach talk about seeing a game at ECU. Ty loves going to the games too, to different minor league ballparks. So I think sometimes it's the eye test, right? I mean, we're lucky to, when we live in minor league towns like that. Zach's over in Charlotte with the AAA Knights, that you can see some players consistently, and you see prospects from other teams that are coming to play at those ballparks. One prospect I want to talk about real quick, which is a big prospect. He was just the Arizona Fall League MVP, Kevin McGonigal. Ty remembers this because I think we were there that day that he and Max Clark came up, and I don't know if Ty was there because I went and slipped into the ballpark just to watch them practice. Just sit in the stands and just watch infield, and I was just amazed at how fluid his hands were and his feet, and how he made everything look so effortless. I didn't even see him bat. I was just watching him in the field, and I was like, this guy's good. All the flash was, of course, Max Clark. But I remember Zach telling me, hey, this McGonigal guy could be better than Max Clark. A lot to go with there, a lot of lead in there. Where's your thoughts on McGonigal, and what are your thoughts on the Tigers farm system, which continues to be one of the highly respected farm systems in the country?
Yeah, I mean, the Tigers farm system was number one for us coming into the year because of just the high ceiling talent they had up top. And that was while Jackson Jobe was still a prospect, right? And while we still had very high hopes for him, obviously this year didn't go as well as everybody hoped, but injuries obviously to blame there. But yeah, back to what you're saying about Kevin McGonigal. It's funny you say that. that you thought that without seeing him hit? Because I think he might be my favorite guy to watch hit in all of minor league baseball. If you were to build a hitter or a hitting prospect, it would look like Kevin McGonigal. He's so spring loaded. He hits the ball hard. He's got exceptional bat speed. That's something he focused on in 2025 was adding bat speed. And he turns on the ball. He can hit it in the gaps. He can lace it down the line. He's hitting it hard. He's hitting it in the air. He's doing everything you want. He's walking more than he strikes out. I mean, everything about him as a hitter is so exceptional. That's why he's the number 2 overall prospect in the game for us. I think the difference between him and Connor Griffin is Connor Griffin is a little bit bigger, a little bit faster, has a better arm, does the other things on the defensive side. Hearing from McGonigal in the fall league, it's the defensive questions that we still have about him. I think he's a future second baseman, but Gleyber Torres just accepted the qualifying offer. So that path is blocked to him in Detroit. He might have to stick to the left side, which is where he played exclusively in the fall league, maybe in anticipation of Torres accepting the QO or at least being back in Detroit. So I think it's going to be the bat that drives him. He has multi-time all-star on all over him. That's basically why you're hearing him spoken about as a potential opening day candidate for the Tigers, despite having no experience above Double-A, is because the prospect promotion incentive, if he were to win Rookie of the Year next year or get MVP, top 3 MVP votes in his first 3 years, he earns the Tigers an extra draft pick. He absolutely has that ceiling, especially on the Rookie of the Year side. If he gets enough at bats next year, I think he can really hit the ground running given that approach and given that bat to ball skills and just how loud it is on contact.
Zach, you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I actually had a question kind of written up about the PPI pick and kind of those new rules. So I'm glad you brought it up, Sam. What's your status on the new rules and service time manipulation? Do you think they got it right? Do you think there's more fixes? And what do you think of the PPI pick?
I like it a lot because I think it hasn't just had an effect on like who is going to make an opening day roster. It's also had an effect on who gets called up late in the year. It used to be, hey, we're going to hold this guy back, not just now, but like into the spring because we're going to try to recoup another year of arbitration or like hold off arbitration by a year with Super 2 stuff or hold off free agency for another year. Now it's like, hey, if we really want you to win Rookie of the Year the following year, we want you going on the opening day roster with major league experience. So we'll call you up in September just to get your feet wet. We don't really care about the results so much. We saw that with Corbin Carroll and Gunnar Henderson a few years ago. And guess what? The Orioles and D-backs were rewarded for that effort. I think it's been good so far. I haven't seen too many chances. I mean, there's been like some times where it feels like a guy's been pushed too aggressively, but I would rather see teams trust their talent and get a little bit more aggressive with their young players than hold them back, which is what happened under the previous system. So draft picks, this isn't a top 10 pick you're getting. It's a pick at the end of the first round, but that does have value. And if you're getting a Rookie of the Year season out of somebody, or in the case of Bobby Witt Jr., who's going to, who's earned the Royals an extra pick, you're getting a top 3 MVP finisher on your roster earlier. I think that's only mutually beneficial for both the player and the organization.
Ty, we were talking about going to the Whitecaps game. Do you want to follow up on any of the prospects for Tigers, or do you want to talk about your Mets?
Well, yeah, I always want to talk about my Mets, but earlier, Sam, you mentioned, which is, I'm sure Zach knows this answer, but I don't. Prospect eligibility. When you were talking about Randy Arozarena, I guess I never really thought about that. Is there like a certain when does a prospect not become a prospect? I guess is there a certain amount of games they have to play, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we go based off of rookie eligibility, and every site is different. Some sites only go off of at bats or innings pitched, and some try to do what we do. It's completely different. But we try to we're only going to rank guys who are rookie eligible. And rookie eligibility is 130 at bats, 45 innings, or 50 innings pitched, I should say, or 45 days of active service. So if you're injured, that doesn't count as service time. And we keep track of that internally. We have a big doc of how many at bats every players had in the major leagues. We have a clock the second they're called up. It gets paused if they're put on the IL or sent down. So that's how we do it. It's 130 at bats, 50 innings pitched, or 45 days of service. And once they accrue that, we take them off the list, or we don't consider them for the list anymore. So we don't want to get into a position where we're ranking somebody who isn't eligible to win Rookie of the Year the following year. So that's our standard. Again, you'll find other sites that'll do it differently. I'm not going to have a saying on like who's better, but at least we're just trying to get you to understand of like if somebody's ranked, that they're eligible.
Now, are
Well-
you updating that list all the time? Like you have to do all that, or does someone else do that?
Updating the big doc that we have.
Yeah.
I am personally not doing that. We have a great staff here at MLB Pipeline, and a lot of people are keeping tabs on that nightly. And we're getting weekly emails of like, hey, so and so is at Jack Caglione is at 130 or 125 at bats. We need a replacement for him soon, or he's going to graduate on Wednesday. Let's get a replacement ready to go for Tuesday, just in case. So we have a lot of people with eyes on that doc, thankfully.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's got to be crazy to keep track of.
It's an unwieldy Google sheet, I can tell you that much. But I'm grateful we have it because otherwise my head would constantly be spinning and trying to keep track.
Yeah, I
of that.
bet.
It's a team effort, like I said, so it's always constant communication. And if somebody misses something, somebody else is picking up the slack. It's a good way of doing it.
So who was your top Mets player? I'm looking at the list right now. 2026 Rookie of the Year candidates.
Yeah, if you're looking for a Met who's going to be the favorite to win Rookie of the Year next year, he's probably
Yes.
the National League favorite, to be honest with you. It's Nolan McLean. He became New York's ace down the stretch, which says more about the Mets rotation than it does how good McLean was. But he was absolutely great. He's got fastball, sinker, cutter, sweeper, slider, changeup. Like everything is moving in different directions. That sweeper might be the best in baseball. It's really, really special stuff. And the fact that, and this has constantly come up with in conversations about him over the last 2 years, is that because of his history as a two-way player, he has exceptional room for growth on the pitching side. And we've seen that in 2025, the way he took off. And the fact that he was still developing as a pitcher as things went on in the major leagues. I think he's definitely going to enter next year in the rotation, assuming health, assuming nothing crazy or unfortunate happens in spring training. If you're the Mets, you have to hope that he's your number 3 starter, like that they can get 2 starters better than him, either through free agency or trade this offseason. But given everything he's shown so far, swing and miss stuff, keeping hitters guessing, I would not be surprised at all if he's putting together a monster 2026 season. And I don't want to say coasting, because it's difficult for pitchers to win, given what we know about injuries and how that can turn at any time. But like, I would say right now he has the inside track, given the MLB experience.
There you go, Ty. Good news.
Yeah, with Dad, when we went to that Tigers series, we just missed him pitch.
Did we really?
Yeah.
That was a tough series. Not as tough as the Mariners series and Tigers, but that was tough too, right, Zach?
Yeah. It wasn't as fun as the playoff game we went to, though.
Yeah, that was rough.
Well, Sam, I got to ask you about Colt Emerson. And I have to ask you about, the whole service time and the PPI pick and all of that. The Mariners have a tough decision on their hands. What they're going to do with Colt Emerson. If he does great in spring training, do they put him on the opening day roster? They need some help on the infield. What do you think is going to happen with Colt Emerson's development?
Yeah, I'm fascinated on that one because, as we sit here now, they do need a third baseman. I do think Emerson has a higher ceiling than JP Crawford. Just got to AAA at the end of last year. One of the better pure hitters in minor league baseball right now. I'm not at the same confidence level as I am with Kevin McGonigal that he can necessarily hit the ground running if he were to come up to the major leagues, but I do think over time he could be somebody who's hitting 280, 290 at the top level. And, could he be in the mix for Rookie of the Year? Wouldn't shock me if he were to get that spot. But the Mariners, you guys opened the show talking about them signing Josh Naylor. They're clearly in win now mode. Like they're not just going to give him the job because he's young and in the system. Like they should be searching for ready-made options on day one for third base. Probably if it were up to me, I would send Emerson back to Tacoma for a month or two, really have him hit his way out of that level, which is very possible he does that very quickly. But I think if you're the Mariners, you really can't let this opportunity slip. You got so close to a World Series, not only getting to the World Series itself, but like given how the Blue Jays did, potentially winning it. Don't let it slip, like lose half a step of momentum just because you want Colt Emerson to maybe get a first round pick. Like you should go out and seek out what the third base options are and try to get one more solid who is ready to go day one. So he's fascinating. He's a good prospect to have. He's an excellent prospect to have waiting in the wings, and I'm sure he's going to contribute to Seattle's depth and make them even better at some point next year. I wouldn't trust him out of the gate immediately.
Well, obviously, I keep talking about Tigers if you want me to, but we talked about McGonigal. Are there other players you think could make impacts on the roster in 2026?
Yeah, I mean, it's still fascinating to see how that infield's going to go because it's not just McGonigal, right? Like Max Anderson, Kevin McGonigal won AFL MVP if I had a vote, and I don't, just for the record. Max Anderson would have been my pick. Now, McGonigal got more plate appearances as he got more playing time, but like on a per at bat, per plate appearance, rate stats, however you want to put it, Max Anderson was more impactful bat for Scottsdale in the fall league. So now where does he go? Does he go to third base? Does he go to second base? He's not a shortstop. Probably you don't want him to move to first base. Obviously with Spencer Torkelson there, and they have some other options at first, but he's certainly going to be pushing for a job himself out of spring. Hao-Yu Lee, not necessarily having the same momentum, but there was a time where Tigers officials were telling me they thought he was a top 100 prospect in the game. Obviously, they're a little biased, but they still really like the bat for Hao-Yu Lee. So those guys will be in the mix this spring. And then Max Clark is just so athletic. He's such a good defender. You could put him in center field right now, and I have no doubt he would do just fine out there at the major league level. And then hitting wise, he's still developing impact. That's going to be a huge thing for me next year is like, how does he continue on that track? Does it stall out or does he continue to build more power? Because if he does that, he's got 5-tool star written all over him. He's not going to be in the mix for opening day like Kevin McGonigal will, but maybe kind of similar deal if they keep riding him. I think he could be a massive, massive talent to add to the Detroit outfield mix and see where things go from there.
Certainly would add a little excitement to the outfield, right, Ty?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Any more on Mets stuff you want to add, Ty?
Not so much Mets. I got an interesting one.
Okay.
And I don't know if you do a lot of this, Sam, or if you just stick with the prospect list, but like, when does it become like a player's like, okay, they're going to have a breakout season? Because when you're, doing fantasy baseball, there's sleeper picks and breakout seasons. When does that kind of happen? Like, okay, this is the moment, breakout season.
Do you mean like how do we define a breakout, or what do you mean?
Yeah, like how do you know when a player's like breakout potential ready? Like, how do you evaluate that?
Oh, that's a good point. So I think spring training is huge for that, because as many sources as we can talk to in the off season, sometimes we'll hear stuff of like, hey, so and so is adding this other pitch or something like that, or we think he's going to add a little bit on his fastball. But I've also had sources tell me like, anything you're seeing in these off-season workouts of like, oh, he touched 98. It's like, well, that's for social media. Is he going to do it? The joke is like, can he do it on a wet Wednesday in Stoke? They say that over in England. Can he do that on a Wednesday afternoon game in Stockton, California? It's a different thing. But I think spring training is when you start to see all that off-season work start to pay off, and guys look a little different. Maybe they change their stance. Maybe they're coming a little faster out of the gate. The other thing that I always think of was Julio Rodriguez used to see that his speed grade, everybody thought he would kind of be average speed-wise. They thought he would fill out, be more of a corner outfielder. And he kind of took that as an affront. I think he even told Jonathan Mayo, like, hey, I'm not a 50 speed. Like, can you stop doing that? And they're like, well, no, we're talking to sources. We're talking to people. We're clocking you speed-wise. That's what we have you as right now. Prove us wrong. Guess what? He did. Some of these guys start to show in like, hey, I'm going to become faster. I'm going to become stronger. I'm going to add bat speed, or I'm going to add this one pitch that completely changes my game. That's where we start to see it, is in spring training, and then it carries into April and May. That's why we do an in-season shakeup, and we also do shakeups of the top 100. If we start to hear things or see things that are like, hey, this guy's really taken off, it's not just a numbers thing, because you'll see some funky numbers in April and May that will look good, but like, is there something beyond that that's happening here? But for me, it's more about process than it is results. We can talk about breakout, like you're waiting for the results to pile up. I want to see somebody who's changed something for the positive, and then I'll be like, okay, this is a breakout candidate for me. 2 years ago, I wrote up like, hey, Kevin McGonigal could be that guy because he started to show it a little bit very, very early after getting drafted. And the Tigers were like, yeah, we think this guy's about to take off. And here he is as the number 2 overall prospect. So it all comes down to what are they building rather than what they built to call it a break.
Good question, Ty. I never really thought about that. Like, how we evaluate the players, not only like where they're at or where they're going. Every player's got to have that moment, right, where they have an incredible year. And how do you predict that? Whether it's statistically or just watching to what level they're going to play at next. Maybe they're at a level that they can handle. Because it was interesting. Like we looked at like with Spencer Torkelson, right? Where they just pushed him so fast to move. Where with McGonigal and Clark, they seem to be like, okay, maybe that wasn't the best thing to do. Because Torkelson, as you know, we've talked about him on the show before too. He seems to, I don't even know what to think, whether he's a legitimate, going to be where he's going to be next year. He might hit 35 home runs. He might hit 10. I mean, I just don't know.
Right. And I mean, those are different circumstances too, right? Like not only just the college versus high school aspect of that with Clark and McGonigal coming out of the prep ranks, and you're not going to start those guys at high A by any means. It's usually at least at highest single A. But the other thing about Torkelson is I think the COVID year just screwed up so many players. As great as he looked at Arizona State and as great as he looked before the pause, he lost an entire spring of at-bats. And I think that's difficult. If that happened because of injury, we'd be like, well, he's behind the 8 ball. There's an entire draft class that is behind the 8 ball and is still building up. And, it's a difficult profile being a righty first baseman in hindsight. That's a difficult first overall pick and a lot of expectations put on a guy like that. But I think it's unfortunate he can't choose when he was drafted. He can't choose when he was born, like when he became draft eligible. But I think that 2020 draft just screwed up so many players, unfortunately.
That'd be a good deep dive someday, right?
Yeah, 2040. I'll write the when everybody's retired. Maybe you never know. Maybe there's a Justin Verlander in there somewhere, and somebody isn't retired
yet. Will the Tigers sign him next year? No, I don't think so. Zach, you want to follow up on anything?
Yeah, I wanted to ask because Sam, you get to interview these guys and talk to these top prospects. I wanted to ask about some things that go unnoticed, specifically for like the top 5 or the top 10 prospects. What are some things that those top prospects have to deal with that a typical, I don't want to say normal minor leaguer, but like your regular minor leaguer, what are some things that those top tier talents have to deal with that go unnoticed?
First off is just the amount of interview requests that they get. I feel like every time I showed up for a Scottsdale game in the Arizona Fall League, Kevin McGonigal was talking to somebody because everybody wanted a piece of him, which he handled with exceptional grace, I will say. Like, I'm sure he's getting asked the same questions all the time of like, what makes you such a great hitter? What position do you see yourself at moving forward? And the really, really good ones, or the ones who I think can really succeed at the next level, are willing to take that on. They know when you make the major leagues, there are going to be reporters in the clubhouse every day. You're going to have to answer these questions. It's the ones who are annoyed by that I'm never going to like factor that. I don't see enough of these guys. I'm not in their living rooms, not hanging out with them playing video games on the weekends. I don't know their personalities completely. But the ones who take that side of the game seriously, be professionals, I'm always like intrigued, and I'm like, all right, that good. You get it. You know how this is going to work. So I think that's interesting. Connor Griffin is kind of the same way. Connor Griffin is exceptionally polite to the media, which goes a long way. And again, that's not why he's the number 1 overall prospect in the game. But it says something about like Pittsburgh's not a huge market, but he's going to be in huge markets where everybody's going to ask him questions. How do you handle that? And how do you stay focused on the field as well? Are you able to compartmentalize? Because that's going to tell me something too, as well. Like if you can compartmentalize the media and you can compartmentalize what you work on, then that also tells me you can compartmentalize your hitting versus your fielding, and one is not going to affect the other. So that's just one thing like behind the scenes that always intrigues me. Who is dismissive? Who's willing to take on the questions? Who's going to provide good, thoughtful answers? Because that's what we're there for, is like, we want to take what's going on in your brain to the fans and make them understand it better. That's how I view my job, is like, I want to make fans understand about what you're doing on the field. And like, if you're sitting here in Brooklyn or there in West Michigan and just watching a game and be like, oh, he took that the other way. I know he's been working on that for 2 weeks because I read it somewhere. Like I want that going through fans' heads, and I want to bring them closer to the action, and have them become better informed whenever they show up at the ballpark.
It's funny, Sam, because like we're very similar, although I'm much older. I would have the same thing too when I was a reporter, and I was, let's maybe interviewing, let's say Steven Tyler, from Aerosmith, and you know, I would interview him, write the article, and the next day you hear people talking, "Hey, did you know that the Steven Tyler and Aerosmith did X, Y, Z?" And they wrote it in your article like the day before, right? So they're like they're interested in that topic, right? And that there's some fun to that, right? Because you are trying to be their, not necessarily the spokesperson, but you're there to help relay information to intense fans.
Yeah, I mean that's the way I view it is bridging the gap, right? Like players have their own language for how they speak. If you ever talk to a pitching coach, like the amount of different things that are said now in terms of how we understand pitching and release point and induced vertical break and all this kind of stuff. How can I take that information? I don't want to say dilute it, but put it in language that the fan can understand and that they can use in their own, game watching or whatever, understanding of baseball. I'm not just dictating what people say. Otherwise, that would be very boring, especially in the social media age in which so many players are online and can share what they want. I want to give it to people in a way that they can understand. And to your point about like people coming up to you and saying, I read your piece or something, or knowing that they understood what you wrote. I love being quoted from my own stuff to me, a little selfish, but I've had people do that before. Like, oh, did you hear about Jonathan Pintaro with the Mets? And I'm like, yeah, I wrote that story that, I'm like, oh, you're the one I read. And he's like, that's correct.
Yeah.
So I love doing that. I love that it's actually making an impact.
Well, Sam, we really appreciate you being here on Big League View in the podcast. Sam Dykstra for MLB Pipeline, MLB.com as well. Let's wrap up with final questions. We'll start with Ty, then we'll go to Zach, and then we'll wrap it up.
I got one quick fun one for you, Sam. Favorite baseball stadium? I'm guessing, let me guess first. I'm guessing it's Fenway, and if it is because it's your, home, a favorite stadium besides Fenway.
Sure. I mean, it is Fenway. I was mentioning before, there isn't a bigger baseball fan or wasn't a bigger baseball fan in Palmer, Massachusetts than myself. I had the Green Monster painted on my room when I was in middle school. And of course, if you're going to paint the Green Monster, you have to put the scoreboard. So this was around the time Ted Williams died. So we put what the scoreboard read at the time he hit his last home run in Fenway, which the Red Sox were losing at the time. So I have friends like come over and be like, why are they losing on your scoreboard? I'm like, no. It's for a reason. Let me tell you the story. But this was like pre-baseball reference days. So my dad was literally mailing this guy in Florida, I want to say, of like who else was playing on that day, what was the score, what would the out-of-town scoreboard have read. So we got it down to that detail. And my dad even took like chicken wire. And this is back before the seats were in. And we stapled chicken wire to be where the net was. So I literally, this is probably appropriate for the name of the show, dreamed in the room that had Fenway Park. Like I would wake up in the morning and see the Green Monster. And so Fenway is always going to hold a special place in my heart, not just because it was the closest baseball stadium to me, but it feels like a museum every time you're walking in. I wish they would maybe improve the seats a little, especially as I get older and a little wider, but that's fine. It's part of the charm. My other favorite park beyond that, that's a good one. I love, this is again, me being a homer, and that probably plays into this some, so take it with whatever you want, but the Brooklyn Cyclone Stadium in Coney Island is just so unique. Like you go to San Francisco, and I've never actually watched a game there. I've seen the ballpark, and you're aiming for the Cove, and that's like a big deal. You can sit in Brooklyn, and you're just watching the beach. You're watching the beach in right field. You're watching the rides in left field. It feels like a carnival atmosphere, and it feels that way in April. Like it gets cold. I've sat there shivering behind home plate and just like hoping my computer doesn't freeze. But it's also feeling like this is summer. This is how baseball should be. This is straight out of the Sandlot almost, which was not a coastal environment, but still like the rides and everything. It just felt, I love going to that ballpark as much as I can. And I'm grateful that it's just a subway ride away.
Well, I know that we're going to ask Zach to go next, but I got to ask you because the guys are probably thinking the same thing as I'm thinking. When you're out in Brooklyn, did you ever run into a character by the name of Benny DiStefano?
Don't think so, but that sounds like a very Brooklyn name. So maybe.
He was a coach, I believe, in the system. He played in the major leagues, and he spent some time in Grand Rapids. We got to know him. He coached in our travel baseball, or he didn't coach, and his son played on our team. So back in the day. All right, Zach.
All right. I'll do another fun one since Ty did a fun one. Sam, what is your favorite month of the year?
Could you repeat that? I didn't.
Yeah, we're
muted?
hearing you.
What is your favorite
You
month of
glitched,
the year?
Zach.
Can you hear me?
Favorite month of the year. Yeah.
What's your
yeah,
favorite
no,
month of
that's-
the year?
Man, it's changed a lot since I've been in this job, right? Like, I do like July because it's got the All-Star game and it's got the trade deadline and it's got a lot going on to it. And I just enjoy summer, for summer being summer. But also the trade deadline, and this could be a whole separate podcast, is also my craziest day of the year because the Padres are one of my team lists. So when the Padres are trading away half their farm system, it makes for a very difficult day. So maybe July has changed a little bit. I will say officially April. And this is selfish of me, but acknowledging that April is when I was born. So it has my birthday. It has the start of baseball season. It has the end of March Madness. So it's got that hope of baseball season, right? Like everything feels fresh and new and spring and it's getting warm again. The sun's setting later here in New York City. Flowers are starting to come out. You've got one of the more special times for basketball. You've got a very special time for baseball. Everything seems to really culminate well for me in April. And also my niece's birthday is now in April. So that's a thing we share that month. So I'll officially say April, but July is very close. And maybe if AJ Preller decided to get a little less active at the tail end of July, maybe that'll sneak back into the number 1 spot in a few years.
Perfect.
Great question, Zach. Never thought of that one. That's a really good question. Well, Sam, we really appreciate you being on the show today. I was gonna ask a final question, but I think you pretty much answered it. I was gonna say, like, why do you do this? I mean, it's like you said, it's 24/7. It never ends. The days are long, but they're rewarding. They're fun, but still they're a grind. I mean, why do you do this?
Yeah, I do this, for because it's always been a dream of mine. And kind of in that way, I write for the 12-year-old kid who was once me, getting the Boston Baseball Magazine and reading about what was happening at various stops of the Red Sox system and dreaming about, like, is this guy I'm reading about now going to be a big deal someday? And do I get to look cool because I read this? Like, I want to be the person that people read and be like, okay, I'm better informed about the game I love. It is a grind and there are times when it's a little crazy. And I do wonder that of like, does this matter? But it's that type of inspiration and the people I read growing up that got me here. So there's going to be somebody else who might be reading me, who might decide to pursue a career in baseball, and that makes it worth it. That short little reminder, whatever it is, whatever it takes, is why I do this, and why I believe baseball is the greatest sport on the earth, and I want people to share in that joy, and share in that information, and we've seen it explode here this last year, I think, and especially coming off this postseason, and whatever we can do to keep that going, and whatever role I can play, I want to keep doing that.
Sam Dykstra, I really appreciate you being on the podcast today. Continued success for you. Hopefully we get you back on the podcast somewhere down the road.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Anytime.
Ty, you want to take people out? Tell them where to get to the podcast if they have not listened before.
Yeah, you can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, under Big League Dreaming the Podcast. Of course, give us a subscribe on YouTube, Big League Dreaming the Podcast. We're on TikTok at Big League Dreaming. And give us a follow on Twitter, X now, at BLD Pod. That's at BLD POD. Episodes every Saturday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will see you on the next one.
Thanks, Sam.
Take care, everyone. Bye, Sam.
Bye, guys.